Hi, my name is Aswan with Carlist, and today we're going to go over a lap of Sepang International Circuit. This video was taken from one of the track days that I attended back in April, and it was a 4-hour track day, although there was a lot of traffic and a lot of red flags, so this was the best lap that we could put together. And even then, there's a bit of traffic and a few problems that we had, but we'll try and get through it. So we're coming down the main straight, and on the main straight we kind of think about things that we sort of have to pay attention to in terms of like oil temperature, oil pressure, water temperature, just making sure that car's running fine, that everything is healthy. And we're sort of sticking to the left as we come down to turn 1, looking at the board on the left, and here is where we start to brake. And you'll notice that we start to head towards the right side of the track a bit early, and it's not the more traditional racing line, but over time you find that this saves a bit of time in terms of it's a distance versus a sort of speed situation. If you try to take a traditional racing line through turn 1, you'll find that you have to cover a lot more ground trying to turn in across the track, and it's just something that you figure out over time. But we'll get through turn 1 first. They're turning in, and now this is something that you have to pay attention to when you come out turn 1. You don't want to be in the middle of the track or sort of going across to the apex of turn 2 too early. You kind of want to hug the right side of the curb as long as you can, and this gives you a better setup for turn 2. So we're going into turn 2 now, and coming out turn 2 you want to be on the throttle as quickly as you can, so you unwind the steering as early as possible, and down through turn 3 and up to turn 4 we're going as fast as we can, going through the gears. But it's important as well to pay attention to your rearview mirrors, and you'll see why in a second, because I have to lift off a bit early and brake a bit early to let the Civic go past. So we enter turn 4. Turn 4 is an uphill right-hander, and you kind of want to carry as much speed as you can because of the gradient of the slope. Going up the hill you come to turn 5, and you can see a mistake here where I turned in a little bit early. And what happens is, if you turn in early, you compromise your line through turn 5, where you end up having to shed a lot of speed, or you end up understeering to the outside, or you basically have you lose a lot of time and speed if you end up messing up your turn 5 entry, because turn 5 leads into turn 6, and you have to carry as much speed as you can, or you end up losing 1 or 2 seconds by the time you reach turn 7. So you can see here that I try to correct it a bit by staying a bit wide and eventually tucking back in, and it's important to hold on to turn 5 as long as you can before you hook over to turn 6. If you turn in too early to turn 6 this right-hander, you will end up compromising your exit speed as well. Now we're reaching turn 7, and turn 7 and 8 is a double apex right-hander. It's a bit tricky because conventional wisdom will tell you to try and hit the apex of both, but you'll find that you actually travel a little bit quicker if you touch the apex of turn 7, and or rather you leave a bit of space for turn 7 to give you a better run up coming out of turn 8 or hitting turn 8. And this is again a critical point, because if you lose too much speed here, you also waste a lot of time getting down to turn 9. So hitting turn 7 and coming out to the edge and going back into turn 8, coming down the straight towards turn 9, and at this point my brakes were feeling a little bit soft, so I had to brake a little bit earlier for turn 9 to let them recover, just give the brakes a little bit more time to breathe. Turn 9 is a very slow left hand uphill apex here, and coming out in lower powered cars you can afford to go all the way to the right hand side of the track, because you don't have to get as much of a sort of wide entry into turn 10 next right-hander. Um, Whereas in high-powered cars or cars with a lot more sort of speed coming up this hill, you want to be in the middle of the track when you exit turn 9. In low-powered cars, it's not so much of an issue. So coming up the slope, we go through turn 10, and we're floating to the outside to prep ourselves with turn 11. Turn 11's again another tricky corner because it's a blind right-hander over a crest, and you can't really see the apex or the exit. So you kind of have to gauge and figure out where exactly you need to lift off or to brake to shed speed. If you brake too much, you also ruin your momentum going up over the hill and down to turn 12. So as you'll see here, I ended up shedding too much speed and ended up taking a very aggressive line back out to the curb, and I've lost speed all the way down to turn 12. Turn 12 used to be more aggressive, as you can see here. You can take it quite aggressively now, but before the renovation in Sepang, this used to be a much trickier corner where if you hit the curb, you were at very high risk of destabilizing the car. In this case, we only had a bit of instability on the exit, and I had to give a bit of quick correction to sort it out. But on the whole, it's a lot easier to take turn 12 than it used to be. So through turn 12, a little bit of correction, coming through 13 and setting up for 14. And this is something that you have to pay attention to when you're on track days. If you look to the right hand side of the screen, you can see some lights. This was a Satria that had spun out and gone into the gravel, and when you're on a public track day or sort of an open track day, you have to be careful with other participants who may go off track, because the way that they rejoin track may not be safe. They may not notice you coming, and if it comes down to setting a clean lap or just avoiding it or sort of compromising it for safety, you should always compromise it for safety. It's not worth having an accident on track. So you can see, going to turn 14, normally I would take it in third gear, but I end up having to slow down so much I go down to second, and down to third, down to second, and waiting for the Satria to rejoin safely, and now I'm back on it. All the way down the back straight, and this is pretty much the home stretch. We're getting ready to go to turn 15. Again, we're checking our temperatures, our pressures, just making sure everything is fine. As we head down to turn 15, we're just looking for the board, getting on the brakes, downshifting. Again, same scenario here. The Civic ahead on the sort of middle of the screen, it was not obvious whether he was going to go into the pits or stay on track, so it's just best to give a bit more room if you're not sure where someone is going, because if they suddenly veer into your path, you don't really have much sort of room for error or margin for error. He decided to go into the pit, so I continue on my track just to finish this lap. Yeah, same thing, back down the straight, going through the gears, and that's it. That's one lap of Sepang. Um, there were a couple of things here that we were sort of aiming to get this track day, because it was our first track day for this car, and we needed to make sure that everything was running properly. One of the issues that we had was we weren't hitting the speeds that we thought we were going to hit on the straights. Normally for a car of this power and weight, you're looking at about 180 plus kilometers an hour, and we're only clocking about mid 170s, and we found out that one of our brake calipers had seized in the rear left, so it's dragging the whole time, and that was also causing some issues with our brake performance, which was why it was starting to fade as well. And at turn 9 we had to brake a little bit earlier. We also had all temperature issues, but it's important that when you take your car to track for the first time, you monitor these things, because if you go flat out for the first time on track and something were to happen, you pretty much, well, first is you'd end up wrecking your engine or your car, and second is you ruin a track day for everyone else. So yeah, that's it. That's one lap of Sepang. Plenty of mistakes, plenty more to improve, and can't wait for the next time. That's it for now.